Welcome to Uncorked, Wine, Business, and Life with Bill Green. I'm Gerald Colton, his co-host. We are here at beautiful Saddle Hill Winery, and as always, we have a very special guest, someone very near and dear to your heart, Bill.
Yes, it really is. It's actually, we've shot, about 16, 17 episodes so far, and, this one's really hitting close to home. I met Sid Brown in the early 90s, and I think we became really good friends around 1995. So this is a long time ago, over 30 years. And I am just so proud to call Sid my friend. We share so many interesting things when it comes to family, values, philanthropy, working really hard, taking anything for granted in life and in business. But, Sid, we met, and my company was getting ready to go public, and you were in business, and you were still in business with your pop and your brothers. And my company was a $60 million company, and so was yours. And today, Sid is the chairman and CEO of NFI Industries, a $4 billion a year company nationwide. Sydney, thank you very much for being on Uncorked.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Gerald. I've known both of you guys for a long time.
Our pleasure.
I would tell you, Bill, as you were just talking there, I was thinking back to those early 90s when we were friends, and I remember how hard we were working, and maybe some other folks weren't working as hard. I remember the Saturdays we were at work, the late nights, missing the dinners with the kids, and even some of the games with the kids. But we were on missions. We were almost motivated. You meet certain people in your life that you just gravitate to because they have the same kind of aspirational goals. And Bill was absolutely one of those folks in my life that I said, hey, here's a guy that's driven, that wants to be successful, wants to be a good person in the community, and really wants to be a good father for his family. A lot of the same shared values. So when you pick up new friendships, and they're not easy to get later on in life, you really pick and choose who those friends are because of, in my opinion, it's the shared values you have at that point.
Wow. And time is so valuable.
Time is absolutely valuable.
Especially when you're absorbed in business and family. So friends are a really important part of life. And I'm sure you're honored with that. I see.
Oh, absolutely. And Sid, I observed, and, we talked so many times about the trials and tribulations of being in a family business, and, your siblings, and your dad was a super high energy, very aggressive guy. And I remember the sermon at his funeral on how the grandkids said, if we weren't talking about business, we wasn't really having much of a conversation with Bernie Brown.
Right.
4 years ago?
Almost 5.
Yeah, almost 5. How'd that impact you?
So, you mean in terms of just my dad?
Yeah, you heard it from your kids, and you're kind of like Bernie, right?
I become Bernie in some ways. Hopefully not.
Exactly,
Like
you learn, right?
Yeah, right.
You take the good.
You learn from you learn from life. You learn from life's experiences.
And there's so much good there.
Yeah.
And you take that and the things you didn't maybe like so much.
I was talking to somebody the other day about, the business and how people perceive me in the business today. And of course, I've got my 2 brothers, Ike and Jeff, that have been partners with me in the business. But quite honestly, I think over the last few years, it's really, I've become the face of the business out to the public. And, I always, growing up, was Bernie Brown's son. And it wasn't until about a decade after being in business that I became my own person. And I don't know that I resented it, but I didn't like it that I was always Bernie Brown's son, because he had been such a dynamic, classic entrepreneur in our industry and in the South Jersey community, that I had to, kind of create my own image and reputation. It took me a bit of time, probably longer than it would normally, just because he was such a big presence. And he was a domineering personality. And one of the things that he taught me at a young age was the ethics of working hard, treating your people really fairly, and never giving up no matter how grim a situation could be. And we went through some pretty tough times together early in my business career. And I watched him, and he came from nothing. He had nothing. And so even when he had something and he had risk of losing it, you know, he said to me, in fact, I'll never forget it, one day he said, well, I never had anything, so if I lose it, I'm just back to where I started anyway.
Sid, go back to, so, you know, you grow up your dad was successful. You grew up in Vineland, New Jersey. It's amazing what roots and how many folks started their careers in Vineland. But, you know, you go to Georgetown, then you go to work for Morgan Stanley.
Right.
You go to Harvard Business School. So you got this amazing experience in education. You come into this kind of, I guess we didn't even say, NFI is a trucking company.
It was known as National Freight back then.
It was called National Freight. And, you know, give us kind of all that nitty gritty stuff, and how'd you kind of make your way with your dad, and how was your dad rough on you, and did he treat you like an employee? Did he treat you like a partner?
And I want to add one thing to that as well, which is you have that education, Georgetown, Wall Street, Harvard Business School, and you chose to go into the family business. So I really want to know about that choice too, because obviously you had other options.
Right. Sometimes I think so I had options. When I get out of business school, I had worked on investment banking. I had options to go back on to Wall Street, work in investment banking, or come back to Vineland, New Jersey, work in a family business that my sister, my two brothers, my father are all there, in the town I grew up in. And I'm thinking to myself years later, what the hell did I do? I mean, really, my choice at that time was, I don't know. You know, there was almost this obligation in some ways to come back in. Maybe there was this sense that I knew there was something there that I could do something with. Wasn't sure. But I will tell you, there's no doubt in the first 5 or 10 years of my career, I thought I made a mistake. And it was always in the back of my head, because you come to those crossroads in life where you can go right or you can go left. There's not too many of them, really. And this one, I went right. And I always wondered in my life, if I went left, where I would end up. And I'm sure, all my peers that I went to business school with were all successful. I'm sure I would have been successful. But most of them look back today at me and said, you really made a good choice. And at the time, I wasn't sure about it. But I think, that what I entered into was a business that was marginally profitable, was a tough business. It's a pennies business. And it was a business that had lots of fluctuations because it was dependent on cycles in the economy. So, we'd have, I remember telling people when I was growing up, we had years when we would go on vacation to Miami Beach, Florida, and I'd think, wow, this is great. And then we would go on vacations to Wildwood, New Jersey, to the Motor Lodge in Wildwood, New Jersey. And as a kid, you're going like, what happened here? Why are we going one place or the other? Well, it was good year, bad year in the business. Over time, we made money, but we didn't make a ton of money. And so I grew up in a nice lifestyle. I'm not saying it wasn't, but we didn't really have an opportunity to build on the business. When I came into the business, we were like an 8-to-1 leverage factor on the business. And I was like, whoa, this is not exactly 100% what I expected, but we started working at it. My dad exposed us at an early age to go on sales calls, got us involved in all the different facets of the business, maintenance, operations, billing, everything. So he was a good mentor from a standpoint that he felt it was important for you to learn the business from the ground up. And his vision was always based upon growth. One of his real teachings to me was, if you don't grow, you die. And he was so right, and that's a mantra of NFI today. I tell all our people, if you don't grow, you die because if you don't grow, you lose good people because you're not giving them the opportunity to grow their careers, because if you're stagnating, there's nowhere for them to go. So, and there's no excitement in a business when it's not growing. And you got to have excitement. You have to have people wanting to see the growth. It's so much better, because for a long time, really from 1983 to 1989, 1990, we didn't grow. And in fact, in 1988, we were one step away from filing bankruptcy. And it was one of the most difficult times in my life. So I was 31 years old, and I had to negotiate a forbearance agreement with 21 different lenders. All of us had personal guarantees on all the debt of the business. Remember the savings and loan crisis way back when? So the economy was hell, couldn't do anything. So what we had to do, I got the forbearance, 31 years old. Who's teaching me how to deal with these
The whole
banks?
word forbearance mean.
Yeah, what was forbearance, right? So we got
They
them
don't
in.
teach that at Harvard Business School.
Yeah, right. So we stopped the principal payments and we just made interest payments. Well, on real estate, that's good because over time, real estate will appreciate. But all those trucks and trailers, they depreciate. So if you're not making those payments, you're underwater. So we took a 1-year forbearance agreement and we bought time. We shrunk the company and we delevered to a certain extent. Maybe went from 10 to 1 to 7 to 1. But we pulled through some pretty tough times. And my dad never wavered. I was like, man, maybe we should file bankruptcy. Maybe we should. It's all part of that learning process at a young age about really dealing with failure, because I was as much a part of it as my brothers were, and learning from that failure all the things that you could apply later in life. So one of the things I learned was debt can be both your friend or your enemy. Okay? If you want to grow something and you don't have the capital, you need to borrow money. And you need to borrow in a way that you can leverage that and make a good return. If you take on too much debt and things don't quite go your way, the whole thing can blow up. So I've really been very, very diligent about growing our business since that time, with the idea of the balance between what makes good sense for borrowing money and what doesn't. And I can tell you that today, the balance sheet of our organization is bulletproof. We could withstand recession after recession and not worry. I sleep at night. I feel good about where we are. But it was all some of those valuable lessons that I learned way back when. Quite frankly, I was at a point where I thought we had just moved into Voorhees, New Jersey. We had just had our first child, Courtney. And I told my wife, it got so bad at one point, maybe you start taking my check, cash it, and put it in a safety deposit box, because I don't know if they're going to come after us or not. Now, I overreact a little bit because I didn't know what to expect. If you sign a personal guarantee, what are they going to come after? What I also learned down the road was, if you're going to sign your personal guarantee to something, you better believe in it. And for a long time after that, I never had an issue putting my personal guarantee on anything I did in real estate, because any deal in real estate that I did, I believed in. And so I always thought that it really is a true test of your character of whether you're willing to sign on a personal guarantee or not. So that's something I learned from my father.
It said, you and I have talked previously to coming on today about failure is what we like to talk about, because every successful person has overcome or gone through a lot of failures. And you probably learn way more in the failure than you do necessarily in all the successes.
Right.
But I'm really curious about how a young Sid Brown, working with his legendary father and brothers, what the decision-making process was in the organization at that point. Because those are some really big decisions, and then you made some tremendous decisions going forward.
Right. So Bill knew my father. There was no question when I got there, my father was the final decision maker. And he knew one way to run the business. And over time, just like anything, you have to adapt and change to the environment. It got to a point that my dad, a little bit later in his life, couldn't make that adaptation. And I understand it, because the world changes around you. The way you deal with people changes. I look at my own self and how I've evolved. But he was the decision maker. And, as I worked with my siblings, and my sister was in it for a while, and then we bought her out, and then we had my two brothers involved in the business. We would just, one of the ironic things is you would have an employee, and Ike might tell him something. 2 days later, Jeff might tell him something. 3 days later, who's he reporting to? Who's he take direction from? So we had to learn, the two brothers and I first, how to deal with each other and our employees before we could, meet with my dad.
Well, you had Bernie was, you and your brothers have elevated the business. Sid's one of the smartest people I know. And, but I love I got to tell my favorite Bernie Brown story. It was 2002 and I had just, left Wilmar, my first business. And
you worked with your
father. I was the chairman. And, many years before, and speaking of risk, I second mortgaged my house to buy my father out. And I'm sitting on the beach, 2002, Sid brings over a Monte Cristo. We go to sit on the beach. And I wasn't really, I wasn't doing anything. That was that one period of time. And I was unemployed and had no business. And Bernie walks up. He lives in the condo next to our house in Longport. And he says, "So what are you doing?" I said, "I'm not doing anything, Bernie." He was in shock. "What do you mean you're not doing anything? You have to do something. You have to do something. It's your identity. You're too young." Man, it took that. I actually went back to school. 6 months later, I started a private equity business.
Wow.
You know who my first investor was? Sid Brown.
Not because of that discussion on the beach, but I will tell you, I remember it vividly. And my father really didn't believe in retirement.
And he was in his 70s probably then or so.
2002, he was,
Yeah.
He was in his late 70s, almost early 80s. And man, he was
running
passionate.
his real estate portfolio.
Yeah, he had his real estate portfolio, but he was passionate with Bill, man. Don't waste that talent. You got God-given talent, do something with it.
Listen, so we're going to take a break here and try our first one.
Speaking of that,
this is a perfect time. We got to.
And Sid, I'm pretty sure you've tried this, but it was when it first came out. This is the Saddle Hill 2022 Reserve. It's that first wine right there.
And I want to dedicate the first one to Bernie Brown because he really was a legend. I've met him on a couple of occasions, didn't get the pleasure to know him like you did, of course, you having him as a father. But you really had a legendary father. And he left an imprint, not just on your family, on this whole community, and going all the way down in South Jersey and beyond. And that's really special. And, I lost my father within this past year. Legacy has become increasingly important to me. Well, Bernie Brown left a heck of a legacy.
To Bernie Brown.
To Bernie Brown.
Made right here.
Big.
It's good, man.
You like that?
I like it.
You need to light up a Monte Cristo with it.
You know what? I thought about bringing some over here.
That's later.
I'm very proud of this. I was here recently with my family, and we all had this, and everybody, of course, loved it.
It's really good. I'm proud of it for a New Jersey wine. Said a major component of NFI is logistics, supply chain logistics, and how your trucking and warehousing all fit into that. And there's also logistics services. So I know you service practically every industry out there, but I do know you're in the distributor and logistics business for liquor companies. And so tell me how that's changed over the last few years. And
Well, first of all, the whole liquor industry right now is in some pretty tough times, and a lot of consolidation. The big distributor RNDC's in big trouble right now. They just pulled out of California. I don't know if you saw that or not.
What do you think the reasons are for that?
So I think some of the antiquated laws that are in there between the tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3, I think need to be changed. I think that some of the state laws, you have this maze of state laws. It's ridiculous. Certain states you can go into a supermarket and buy anything you want. Other states, like Pennsylvania, got to go into a liquor control board controlled store. I'm not going to profess to be an expert in the whole alcohol industry, but we are a provider of services for a couple of the major folks that sell retail. And right now with the tariffs going on, nobody can figure out what's up or down in terms of particularly those that are importing from, Europe, primarily a little bit of South America, but mostly Europe. And you hope that the California folks don't raise their prices to just be, on a par where they're just going to make more money instead of maybe keeping their prices low and just picking up market share. But the hard liquor from the wine, really different markets. What we're really seeing now with some of our customers is the infusion of certain non-alcoholic CBD or whatever that stuff is out there today that they're infusing this stuff with. So it's a changing dynamic, and some of the old rules don't make sense for the environment we're in today. I mean, why can't you just go online and buy anything you want from any person, right? It's ridiculous.
It's driving
It's
me
his
nuts.
domain now, and
We're dealing with it all the time.
he's
dealing
fighting
with it
for
all the
law
time.
changes within the state as well.
Yeah, it's just some of the monopolies, state of New Jersey's got a couple guys that basically have a monopoly on the state of New Jersey in terms of the distributors. And they're good companies, and they're good, they've been run family businesses or whatever, or public or private equity owned. But at some point, the world changes and the laws need to change with them. And so hopefully we'll see that. But I think it's just remarkable what Bill has done here. And, I've known Bill, and I know this a little bit about me, but I'm going to talk a little bit about my friend Bill here for a second, if I may.
He deserves it.
But, Bill's an idea guy. And Bill gets an idea, and he gets passionate about that idea. And he says, I'm going to do a business. I'm going to make a business. I'm going to invest. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And then he does his research before he even starts. It's amazing the amount of research he's done in getting started with something. But this one threw me for a little bit of a curveball because, I thought, he was going to start with a farm. And I go, what's Bill going to, grow here? But he was always into his wines. He was always coming over my house, and we'd have these Sunday night dinners with our kids, and Bill would bring in these wines, and there was never glasses good enough in our house. He had to bring his own glasses, and we'd get over there and we'd drink these great wines, and and I'd bring out a bottle. It ain't good enough. It's not rated good enough. But he had a passion that flourished now with what he's done here from scratch. It's been amazing for me to watch. Hopefully someday he'll get a return on this thing. But sometimes the return is just the rewards of what you get, the enjoyment of what you get out of what you're doing. And, some people, ask me, you go, why are you still doing this? You don't need the money. It's not the money. It's the passion. It's the passion of why he's doing it today. If you don't have a passion for something, don't do it. I feel strongly about that. So strongly that when I was raising my kids, I deliberately said, you need to go do something else. If you want to come back into this family business, that'd be great, but you need to go find your passion and decide what that is before you decide what you want to do the rest of your life.
And on that, so Bernie, gives me the kind of like, you got to do something with your talent.
And Bernie would approve of this, I'm sure.
Yes.
Very
Because
much.
it's a passion.
It's a passion.
So, I kind of decide that I'm going to start doing private equity, and I was a co-investor with other private equity firms. And I got to tell you, this was a major decision I made in my life. And it was just because I was just so nervous about failure. So I was nervous to go back into business at 43 years old because I was wildly successful in my first 25-year career. What if the next business wasn't successful? I'd be like a one-hit wonder, and it was just kind of a fluke or whatever. So then I start this private equity business, and Sid's my first investor, and we brought in a few others on U.S. maintenance. We did incredibly well. But even before that, we knew it was going to do well. I went to Sid's house on a business, Coffee Bean International. I sat down in his house in Voorhees, about a mile from this location, and I showed him all the stuff and the presentation, and he asked me questions I didn't have the answer to, and I was embarrassed. To speak about due diligence and understanding, I said to myself, I walked out his front door. I said, I will never sit in front of this man unless I know everything. And trust me, this guy, he will absolutely get a question I haven't thought about, But if I get 90% there, I'm going to feel good about myself. And that was, oh my God. And then we went to do a bunch of other deals after.
yeah.
Some worked, some didn't work. But at the end of the day, we had a lot of fun. And it was, you know,
One of the ones that didn't work was in the wine business.
it was.
It was.
Well, liquor, it was in
In the liquor,
in the liquor
with
industry.
some wine guys.
Oh my God. And that was our biggest loss.
Yes,
And that was our biggest loss.
that
But
was our biggest loss.
Sid, you're, you know, I just love your kids. They're kind of like mine. Talk about now they're in your business, all of them. And you had a rule. It was a Bernie rule, right? You come out of college.
No, this was my rule.
Oh, that was your rule.
This was my rule.
Okay.
Yeah, this was, you know, the business takes on the personality of the people that own the business. And I was the only one of my siblings that ever went on and worked somewhere else before coming back into the business. And I saw the value of that. And I said, you know, if we're going to consider the next generation, they all have to go work somewhere for 4 to 5 years, including if they want to do a stint at grad school, whatever that grad school may be. They want to go to law school, who knows? But go out there, get some real world experience, create your own network, create some personal identity where your last name doesn't mean anything and you got to really work for everything that you're doing. And by the way, go find jobs that weren't because of connections related to who we knew. So,
How about also learn some stuff that you can bring back? And maybe help?
absolutely. Absolutely. And have that network that you can use for the rest of your life. You know, probably my most valuable network was my business school network. And I use that still to this day, from connections to advice to counsel to whatever it may be. And so the value of that networking was what I wanted my kids, my nephews, my nieces to experience, because there are 9 of the next generation, 9. 6 are now in the business. They all have gone through this 4 to 5 year, you know, journey, as I call it. And they all, when they came back, started back in the business at levels that were 2 or 3 down below from where they started. So they started on the floor in the warehouse, dispatching trucks, whatever it may be, but they came from an experience and a know-how where they understood what an organization was, and they understood that just because your last name was Brown somewhere else doesn't mean anything. And they all wanted to be not considered special when they came to work in the business. So that was grounded in them from the get-go.
We use the word grounded. I mean, I have found this with all of your family members. There's a humility and humbleness to them. And I'm sure that also helps to start from the bottom up. So you never look down on anything, never disrespect anybody's work or where they come from.
It's so true. You know, guys, I want to share something about my personal experience in business that I'd like to make sure we cover here. I had so many of my friends that had their own businesses, not just here, but all over the country, or they went to go work somewhere. But I saw so many of my friends and so many of my peers building businesses. And I noticed it with my dad, and I made a point of trying to figure out how I was going to be different. A classic entrepreneur will go build a business. Classic entrepreneur can be pretty insecure at times. They want to make every single decision. Nobody can do it as good as they can. So you're sitting there, and we're classic entrepreneurs, and everything's got to kind of go up to here. Well, that can be done with a company up to a certain size. And that's what happened with my father, and I witnessed it. And I saw that, you know, not that he had a bunch of yes men working for him, but if every decision has to ultimately go to the one person, the organization will stymie in its ability to grow and move forward in a rapid pace. One of the biggest transitions, if I could give advice to people trying to grow a business,
Please.
is the ability to transform yourself over different stages of the growth of the business. So when I took over, and that was back in 1997 as CEO, and at the time we were about $120 million, I took over a company where everybody was used to one guy making the decisions. So for a period of a couple of years, I had kind of taken on that mantra, but I realized that was something that wasn't going to work for me long term. And one of the great events that happened to me, I won't call it great, but one of the life-changing events that happened to me is that I had a heart attack at age 39. And when you have something like that, you realize that you have to change what you're doing. Otherwise, the stress of what I was doing was not going to change. I was going to put myself in the same position. And I was playing basketball with this guy at the JCC when that heart attack happened. And I took myself inside out of this game 6 times. Bottom line was, I learned the art of delegation. I had to. And so many classic entrepreneurs get to us, they don't know how to delegate. They just don't. So the advice, I could give to entrepreneurs is figure out, not necessarily in the beginning, but figure out. Because once you start the art of delegating, you're going to attract people that are so much more talented than you had before, because you're empowering them to make decisions that affect the company, and it all doesn't have to come up. And I have gone through over my time period here about 3 major changes in management structure and organization. It hasn't been the same. And I've had to recast what my roles are. I used to love operations. My brothers, we all grew up in operations. Well, as you grow this business, if I'm just so engrossed in operations, I can't see the forest through the trees. So I had to kind of assimilate that style of business, of management, to a much bigger organization. So what do I do today, for example? I don't micromanage my people. I empower them. Today, I'm a coach and an advisor. Do they do it 100% the way I'd want to do it? No. Do they do it 80, 90%? Yeah. And I've seen it so many times. Most entrepreneurs, they can't accept that. It's true. I've seen it so many. They can't accept that. Oh, well, he only did it 90%. That's wrong. You should have done it this way. You should have done this. You should have done that. True, but let them learn, coach and advise. Don't castigate them for something like that.
And to that point, I mean, oh my God, 90% is fantastic. But I think another part of it, an entrepreneur, a lot of times when they're self-made, you take a lot of risk. It's that ego that gets in the way. And the ego is like friggin' killer. Right? And you say, well, I don't want anybody to make a decision, or they can make a recommendation, but wrong, right? You gotta let them run with the ball. And
you gotta let them run with the ball.
They have to make their own mistakes.
Yeah. How else are they going to learn? And how else are you going to grow as an organization? Really grow. We have 18,000 employees today, right? And I can't manage 18,000 employees. I don't want to manage 18,000 employees. I want to make sure that what we do is really create an environment. I call this the entrepreneurial environment within the organization, where you're, allowing people to really make those day-to-day decisions. It's true. Every once in a while, I revert back. I get into the details. I go back in time. It's actually kind of nice to do it once in a while. You get a little invigorated, but it's the wrong thing. Maybe not, because it shakes it up a little once, but you can't do it all the time. So it's one of those things that I really kind of advise people as they're growing their businesses. And sometimes an outside coach can be helpful with that, but it's really, you got to almost step back. You got to park your ego. I talk about that all the time. Park your ego and let other people grow and prosper and take some of the credit for it. It's not the worst thing in the world. It doesn't have to be you all the time taking the credit for it.
Oh, I mean, it's such a, and Sid, you've been an investor in the two of the businesses where, that I brought in somebody that was junior and they wound up replacing me. And it is such a great feeling that you could take some folks that came in and just trusted you.
Can I tell you about all those conversations you had with me about some of these guys?
Oh,
and
my
man,
God.
He's just not doing this. And he's just not, I'm not sure he's the right guy. How many conversations do we have?
All right, with that, a couple of weeks ago, we had dinner at Luna BYOB in Philadelphia. You brought a bottle of Barolo. And, I should have made the decision for you on that one. I didn't like it. I have another one right here. It's the second one.
Oh.
So I want you to take a taste of this.
Tell us about the
And
wine.
and the reason why
I think his wife liked it, though, Gerald. I do think his wife liked it.
And Amy's got great taste.
But the other reason why I wanted to bring in an Italian wine or a wine not from the U.S. is you've done a lot of acquisitions, and it's been a big part of your growth. One, Cal Cartage was a company that manages the containers coming off the water. So cheers to Italian wines that coming off the water.
Come off the ports.
And Amy liking the wine.
No, Amy.
I'm really happy she liked the wine.
Well, actually, I did. You know what's funny? I opened this just before we started. I don't like this one either. Maybe I got to step up my game on Italian wines.
Well, I'll tell you, because everybody has taste. The first one was really good.
Well, that was mine. Thank you very much.
I don't think this has sat out enough to.
It's different.
You think it's
though.
too tight?
I think it's a little bit tight.
It's much sweeter, of
Well,
course.
it's actually interesting because Sid's wife, Sandy, who she's really the wine collector in the Brown family. So her and I have a lot of opportunity to talk. Now, question really is, Sid did come from Vineland. Sid still has his first dollar that he earned as a paper boy in Vineland. So Sandy doesn't necessarily buy the next wine we're going to
but that's what we talk about, how there's great wines at all prices.
They are.
And I'm very curious, what is the price point of this?
$75, $80. Not
For the Barola?
expensive. Yeah, you got to remember Italian wines. I mean, unless you get into the Guy, some of the Antinoris, you're really not pushing the price level. But the third wine we're going to try is absolutely up there on price. So we're going to see if.
And we're going to give that a moment.
But I want to talk. I really want to talk about how these acquisitions and how you integrate the culture into this very strong business with a family-led culture.
Okay, so background, we bought my dad out in 1999, 2000. And I
was that a
said
tough negotiation?
7 years. I can tell you about that. I can tell you about that too. And that's a
I
good
love
story.
negotiation stories. I really do.
Let me just, I'm not going to go into all the specifics. I will tell you one thing. After 7 years, well, two things I'll tell you. One of the things he said to my brothers and I, he says, look, I can only sell this, or one of you guys has to be the boss. You can't rule by committee. And if I choose one of my sons to be the boss, the other two are going to resent me for the rest of your life. And that made sense. And he goes, so why don't you guys figure it out? And if you can figure it out, then I'll sell you the business. This was after 6 years of negotiations. This was or 5 years, and this was like another delay because this was his identity. I appreciate it later in life. So we spent 2 years with a consultant down in Marietta, Georgia, at Kennesaw State College, a family business consultant, my two brothers and I, and we figured it out. And again, parking our egos, who had what talents for what were the rules of engagement going to be, and how can we manage this company going forward? So the expectations were put there before we started, and we all kind of knew what our roles were going to be. And really, when it came down to it, any huge major decisions, I would consult and have to have unanimous vote from my brothers. But how often does that happen? Acquisition, major capital expense, and maybe one of the senior executives I want to hire or fire, I'd want to consult with them. And it's the right thing to do when you're their business partner. And by the way, I respect their business judgment. And sometimes they would give me advice other than what I was thinking, and I took it and ran with it. So,
Sid, knowing Jeff pretty well, you guys are very different.
Very different.
Which I'm sure is great, your complementary personalities.
Absolutely. And you don't really know my brother Ike. He's probably a little bit more like me, but he is a different personality than me.
And I love Jeff. He's one of the nicest, greatest
I don't
guys
know anybody that doesn't love Jeff.
Exactly.
So we go into the final negotiation. We come up with a price. And I said, so how much of a note do you want to take and how much do you want us to put down? He goes, I want all cash. I said, what do you mean you want all cash? Now, this is about a decade later after we had hocked ourselves up the gazoo and almost went bankrupt. So he goes, no, I want all cash. I said, why? And he goes, well, I had some friends in Florida that I play golf with. They sold their businesses to their kids. They took back notes. The kids ran the business into the ground and they didn't get anything. I don't want to be in that position. I said, I hear you, but how much of it? He goes, cash, that's it. And I think this was another, in some ways, a delaying tactic. But so I went back to my brothers. I said, guys, we're going to have to hock ourselves up, put personal guarantees to buy them out. What do you want to do? One brother was a little bit hesitant, but at the end of the day, we said, you know what? We're going to do it. So went in, and I don't think he figured we were going to do that. So we hocked ourselves up. It was the best thing we ever did, because no longer were we beholden to him as our largest or one of our largest creditors. We had the onus of the banks, the personal guarantees, to really keep us motivated to move this thing forward with that kind of hanging over your head. But it also gave us, there was a clean break. We were done. It was on us at that point. And so we went on and did that. It was, and every negotiation that I've had since then, the one thing that my dad told me was a negotiation's got to be fair for both sides. If somebody gets too much on one side or the other, it's going to blow up after a certain period of time. It's like paying a professional athlete too much money. At some point, it's going to blow up because either he's not earning it or you're not paying him enough for what he is doing for you. So, or I could name numerous things. So every business deal that I go into now, and I've told my people this, you can't make it so that it's such one-sided that you feel like you won. A good business deal is usually consummated when both sides really walk away feeling not so great about it.
That's right.
That's the bottom line.
I left a little bit too much on the table.
Yeah.
If everybody says that, it's a good deal.
It's a good deal.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Sid, we share a lot of family values, and we also share the fact that we don't give back and we don't embrace philanthropy because it's a tax deduction. It's because it is an obligation of folks that become successful to help others that can't help themselves. I want you to talk about, you don't have to name charities, but I know you're wildly philanthropic. I've seen you pay off mortgages and get nonprofits out of trouble. Talk about philanthropy and where you are and where you're going. Great
question. Again, my mother, who we haven't really mentioned, is really, she was a great example in our family. Talk about being humble. My mother taught us to be humble. She really did. Neither of my parents came from anything. And my mom always kicked me in the butt saying, don't forget where you came from. Don't forget where you came from. And I don't, but they were very philanthropic. And, you learn by just when you're a kid watching and growing up. And all my siblings, including myself, are very philanthropic because we learned from our parents. But beyond that, I've taken it, and quite frankly, I think primarily they gave to Jewish causes back then. I think I'm a little bit more geared towards things that are important to me are education and healthcare, and including Jewish causes, but education and healthcare across our whole communities. And so I've always told my kids, knowledge is power. Okay? It's a great statement. Knowledge, if you know something, that's why I'm so inquisitive all the time, because I seek knowledge. This guy is always asking questions. So knowledge is power. So I believe in really providing kids with the opportunity to learn, particularly low-income kids. So I spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to help people. We've made a big commitment to the city of Camden. I've been involved in the city of Philadelphia with a bunch of organizations, most notably the Cristo Rey organization. And healthcare, I'm involved with Cooper, and my brothers and I have been involved in the Cleveland Clinic, the Mayo, some of the other institutions.
Fort Freedom, that was a fun.
Fort Freedom was for our veterans. When you give money, it's easy to write what I call these small checks, but it almost doesn't mean anything to you because you want to give money where you can personally see a difference, meaning you're making a big enough contribution so that you can visualize or actually concrete see the results of what you've purposely done. Sometimes it's a building. Sometimes it's a scholarship program. Sometimes it's an internship program. Sometimes it's funding research for a specific thing. But something touches you in that inner heart that makes you want to do it in a way that, one, gives you personal satisfaction, but two, actually you can see some of the results. I've seen a lot of people give money and then they just walk away and they don't, really kind of follow up on it. And maybe that's okay for them. I don't begrudge that. I just like to give money and actually follow up. So there's this, there's a day school here locally that was going to go out of business.
I drive by it often.
All right. And, I decided to, be a benefactor and became the principal benefactor. And now that school today is thriving and I get so much personal satisfaction. And I don't really know any of the parents of the kids anymore because our generation has gone on. But I see the kids and I see what these kids end up doing in their lives. I just saw a video of like 3 kids that left and went to go fight for the Israeli Defense Force right now. And, how great is that?
That's amazing. And so, I always say that, it's great to write a check. It's great to volunteer your time. When you do it all, when you can do both, it's really amazing. And I know you've done both. But I think for me, the lesson that I always want to impart is, there's going to be listeners and viewers out there saying, yeah, it's easy for these 2 rich dudes to talk about giving away money because they have so much, but it doesn't really matter. And, my parents weren't philanthropic. And I always said, well,
but
you can give away $10.
We weren't rich dudes growing up.
I know, but
I mean, we had, we never suffered for not having a meal on our plate, right? You're a product of public high school. I'm a product of public high school education. I went to a couple nice universities. I'll be the first to admit, but I worked hard in high school to get there. Always worked for it. Nothing was given to us. But to have the honor and privilege to be able to give money away, that was earned.
It's an honor.
It's an honor. It was earned.
Speaking of honor, you're both very honored.
That's a great time to transition.
You're very
to our
honored
third
to
taste.
taste my 19. It's not mine.
You might want to clean the palate for this one.
All right.
All right, we'll do that. Got a
Yeah.
little water here.
This is a special wine. This is a 1995 Haut-Brion Bordeaux from France. 30 years old.
3 years old.
30.
30 years old.
This is the year we became very good friends.
1995. So it took me 2 years to become his good friend?
Well, this guy.
I'm just
wait a
kidding.
minute. No, it was actually kind of interesting because we became fast friends. And I'll never forget, I was 40. It was 41 or 42. And
No, we were friends before that.
I know we were friends, but we became really, the family.
We were playing on the basketball court together. We were friends.
That must have been some
couple
sort.
years
You were just having a heart attack. We lost that game.
I wonder
You know why? Because one of the best scorers on the team had to
was
drop
good.
out.
He was good. Shit, made me
To your
lose my
friendship.
train of thought.
to your 30 plus years of friendship.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, there you go. Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Wow.
Yeah, this is special.
This is good.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's not to be inappropriate, but can you share the price tag on that one?
Wow. I don't remember exactly.
Was it an auction?
No, this was one of the first wines I bought on futures. So when I started collecting wine in early 96, the wines I were buying were in the 80s, mostly in the 80s. But then I was able to buy wines as futures. So in 96, I was able to order wines that hadn't been bottled yet. And I was strictly a French wine collector.
So let me just, I have to say, this is indicative of when my friend decides he wants to go in, he's all in. I know he wrote a book.
All in Bill Green.
All in. But this was so indicative. All of a sudden, man, this guy from South Jersey, okay, didn't go to college, becomes a friggin' wine connoisseur, doing all this, buying futures, buying at auctions, getting this big beautiful wine cellar downstairs that he builds in his house. And man, where did this come from? This guy was in the parts distribution business.
Well, wait a minute. You're a trucker.
And here we are.
Here we are, right?
Here we are.
but Sid, you've touched on it a bunch of times as we enjoy that delicious wine. Education. And you guys are different in that background, as much similarities as you have. And I always waffle because I am a big believer of education to some extent. I also know so many incredibly brilliant, successful business people, entrepreneurs who did not take the formal education route. You got a business degree, an MBA from the best business school, recognized as one of the best business schools in the world. So I'm just curious how much you think that contributed, because you said something earlier that I thought might have been the best part of going to a Harvard Business School, which is a network of people that you still have 40 years later. So I'm just curious your take on education and the importance of it.
Yeah, it's an interesting question because my daughter ended up going and getting her MBA. I'm very proud to say at MIT. And I didn't push my two boys because I didn't think it was right for them. Because they got a different type of education. You know, it's different today than it was 40 years ago. The internet and all the things that have come from the internet have really changed the landscape to a certain extent about what the value of a college education, what it takes to start a business versus, you almost had to kind of go through this process in order to get certain doors opened for you. I don't think that's the case today, and necessarily from an educational standpoint. Look, I got great academic training. Okay. I was, kind of at the top of my class for most of it. My business school experience, what was I going for grades at that point for? There was nothing beyond that. I went for just being there, absorbing and learning and networking, because it was the time in my life where I was surrounded by the smartest people I would ever be surrounded with in terms of numbers, and for 2 solid years. And I was like a sponge, just trying to learn from them, and maybe they were learning from me. But when I got out, most of that wasn't applicable to the real world. But there was just certain financial fundamentals that I gained that had been invaluable. Bill would give me come over on these private equity deals, and I'd look at statements, and in 5 minutes, I'd start rattling questions to him that it was innate. It became innate in my just character of looking at things.
And I think you touched on it earlier, but you have some most awesome friends from B school that how many times have we socialized, and we're in Aspen, or we're traveling here and say, hey, we're going to catch up with Andy or Shecky, or, and these guys have become my friends. And actually Andy and I did a deal together, which you were in. Right.
So, one of the values that I do think helped me with the academic is, and we started touching about, is the amount of acquisitions that I've done over my career. So I was thinking, I was in the banking business. Our family got into the banking business with Sun Bank. We started that in 1986. I was on the board with my dad. He was chairman. Eventually I became vice chairman. Eventually I ended up becoming CEO because we had fired 2 different guys along the way. I was like a multiple CEO running this public traded bank and running NFI. I wasn't home very much. I was working 20 hours a day, but I did a bunch of bank acquisitions, and then I've done, probably 35 or 40 M&A deals on the logistics side. And there is the art of the deal, and there's the art of negotiation. It's hard to teach people. Best way to you can almost is have people just observe, but you have to know where the other side is coming from. You have to understand their background when you're negotiating with somebody, particularly a classic entrepreneur that's ready to sell his baby. Okay. You have to be very cognizant of the ego that's involved on the other side and the emotional attachment that's involved on the other side. And a lot of times these investment bankers don't get it. And these big private equity guys don't get it. And these big publicly traded, because their frame of reference is different. Mine is, I can relate to them. So I've been, that Cal Cartage deal, every private equity and public company tried to buy that company. Nobody could do it. we go in, I'm dealing with an 86-year-old guy at the time, or 84-year-old. I felt like I was dealing with my dad 20 years earlier. Same type of scenario. So I came from a frame of reference. I ended up doing that deal that everybody on the streets came back and said, how'd you get it done? Nobody could do it. So I do believe that there's the art of the deal. The other thing I would tell you is due diligence. I'm a stickler about numbers and doing the due diligence. And we do it mostly internal. We don't use external. We do it I've got guys that we do it internal. And then knowing the customer base, really understanding that customer base. At the end of the day, not every acquisition worked out. You know, in the world of acquisitions, only about 35% of them are actually successful in bringing accretive shareholder value. Think about that, 35% success rate. And I would say my success rate's been the opposite. I think it's about 65, 70%, but I made some bad acquisitions. Again, what did I do wrong? Learn from those failures, right? It's like you make private equity investments. They're not all going to be great, but you learn. All right, so and if you don't reflect back and say, well, what did I do wrong? It's always easy to blame somebody else. That guy didn't do this, that. You got to look at yourself in the mirror and say, what did I do wrong? Mm-hmm. So learn from the next one.
Buck stops right here.
Yeah.
Right? That's what's called leadership. When you take it, when you push the mistakes down, you're not a leader.
And on negotiation, you said it earlier, Sid, how a good deal is when both sides walk away saying, maybe I could have done better. But you touched on it that a lot of the investment bankers, and you've dealt with a whole lot more than I have, but don't really get it. And truly, if you are negotiating with somebody, that means you both want to make a deal. There's an incentive there to make a deal. So putting yourself in the other person's shoes has worked for me in legal negotiations and sports contract negotiations, and really understanding and knowing that you really want to make it a win-win, even though you know you might not get the best deal. Because crushing somebody at the table doesn't really do you good in the long run.
No. And, you know, you inherit in culture. It's very important to figure out how to assimilate that culture into yours. If you can't do it, you're probably going to have a failed, acquisition. The other thing I would tell you, look, I have a lot of respect for investment bankers, but sometimes you got to just say, move over, get out of the way, let us handle it. You're going to get your fee. Don't worry, you're going to get your fee. But you got two people here that need to just sit down and cut a deal. And so, and there's nothing wrong with that. Some investment bankers think they're the ones that should negotiate the deal. I don't, some cases maybe, but most cases I don't believe that.
Yep. Sid, I want to talk to you about pivots, because you've done a lot in your career and your business, and taking a family business that was, I guess, national freight when you first got there, and mostly a trucking business, and turning it into logistics and a whole lot of other tentacles from it. Talk about the pivots, how they came along, how much foresight they took, or was it just reading the tea leaves at the moment?
No, I think there was some foresight here. There was some trial and error along the way.
I got to believe that.
So, in a nutshell, when I was in the business to begin with, we were a very transactional business, meaning that there was no term to our contracts. And so, for a penny or two a mile, somebody could say, national freight, you haul this one day, XYZ carrier, you haul it the next day. So what I wanted to, and we were very dependent. Our biggest customer at the time was Owens Corning Fiberglass, which was tied to the housing industry. And, you have these real cycles in the housing business. So one of the things I thought about was we got to diversify and really get to a much broader base and stable base. So I believe in diversity. And I'll show you. So diversity in the Northeast, that's where we were based. Snowstorm hit, we're out of business. All these trucks can't go. Ike goes to Texas. He opens up a division in Texas. He calls up and you go, hey, how are you guys doing up there? Well, we're shut down. Hey, we're still running down in Texas. Nothing going on down here. So the value of diversity, geographic diversity, was one thing that I wanted to make a pivot on. Get away from just being in the northeastern part of the U.S. Today, we're all over the U.S. and all over Canada, starting to enter Mexico a little bit. I believed in vertical diversity, meaning that we shouldn't be just in do you want to be dependent on the automotive? Do you want to be dependent on technology? So I made a decision that I wanted to food and beverage. I really wanted to do because it's always being consumed. There's not these highs and lows. It's kind of steady eddy. People always have to eat. People always drink, whether it's beverages, it's alcohol, whatever it may be. Third thing, paper products. Everybody uses toilet paper. Everybody uses diapers. So if you can, it's
Consumer products, CPG.
CPG. So, have a steady base that you can rely upon and then build some industry. So we've done a lot in the toy industry. That can be really good, but if you're not the hot toy for the year, it can be ugly. And that's like the fashion business. There's going to be goods and bad years. I mean, we've got some really brand name fashions companies that we do business with. But man, when they're hot, it's great. But when they're not, it's not a pretty picture. So I've tried to build the base. The other big transitional thing I did was I changed the model from a transactional model to a contractual model. So what that means is most of the business we do in the warehousing business and our dedicated fleet business is 3 to 5 year contracts. And it matches the capital allocations that we have to make on the equipment, the forklifts, the warehouses, whatever it may be. So there's more of a match between capital and term of contract. And then the transactional business that we still do, which accounts for about 30% of our business, most of it is asset light. So I'm not necessarily putting capital against transactional short-term business. So today, when we do our budgeting and we do our planning and looking at where we want to spend money, it's almost like 70% of our revenue stream is in the bank because we're on annual multi-year contracts. And, I'm proud to say, just in the last 3 weeks, we signed $160 million of annualized business over a term that has average term about 5 years. So if you analyze that, it's almost $800 million worth of business over the next 5 years. And I got to sit back, and then I got to say to myself, $160 million. When I started, we weren't even $160 million. And it's like that wow factor. I can't believe this is me still involved in doing this at this size. But the power of scale, I just had a senior management meeting. And I talked about the power of scalability. When you get to scale, there's so many more things that are opportunistic for you out there. You got Bill always kind of jokes at me, Brown, you got infrastructure. You can handle this, you can handle that. Yeah, that's true, but that infrastructure wasn't there unless you had scale and you were growing.
That's right.
So with the famous words of Bernie Brown echoing in my head and keep going. And clearly here you are, 30 years post heart attack, grandchildren now.
First one.
And more on the way. And I don't know if we've named Sandy by name. We probably have, but you have a fabulous wife, I'm sure has been a huge part of having your back, being part of the journey, probably helping you with.
Oh, he outkicked the coverage there. Let me tell you that.
There's no question that
we got to give a shout out to her.
Yeah, there's no question. I mean, I would never have been as successful. She was my sounding board. She should have been a psychologist or whatever, but she was my sounding board. She knows enough about the business to ask the right questions. And she was kind of the one that I always could go to and say, well, what do you think about this? Or what do you think about that? And she just knew people and how people interact. And she had the emotional IQ that sometimes I might not have had to help me kind of think things through. She was there when I was traveling and building this business to raise 3 great kids, Courtney, Eric, and Jake. And they wouldn't be where they are today if she hadn't grounded them in just everything she did to bring them up. So I am really fortunate to have her as my wife and my partner through all of this. Yeah. One of the things people talk about that I did want to highlight, family business. They go, how do you make it? How's it work? So one of the things is, first of all, Ike, Jeff, and I are close. We like to vacation together. We like to hang out together. We're all enthusiastic sports nuts. So we have a lot of commonality in our business and our personal lives. More importantly, our wives get along. And if our wives didn't get along, that would have caused a lot of tension.
I have 3 sons that are all getting married the next year, and they're each other's best friends. And fortunately, it looks great with the future daughter.
It might look good on paper. I hope it works out, right?
But we know the dynamics can change. So that is a fabulous thing.
And the cousins, because the wives got along, the cousins are like best friends now. And he's met all the whole family. I feel blessed that they like being with each other,
The best.
which means ultimately they're going to be business partners and hopefully they're going to continue. People say, well, why don't you take the company public today? Or why don't you sell out to private equity? I go, for who or for what, right? Remember Ricky Waters on that one? For who, for what? The business doesn't need the capital, right? It's a legacy that we were given the foundation to grow upon. This is a legacy that they have the opportunity to grow and do what someday if they want to take it public, that's for them. That's for them to decide. But you think about America today, how many generational businesses make it to third or fourth? Most of the time they're sold to private equity or go public.
Of course.
Private equity was not a dynamic 30, 40 years ago. That's changed the generational businesses.
I wasn't there when you were at Harvard Business School.
No,
really
it was
wasn't.
not.
Yeah, it wasn't.
So what's next and what's ahead for Sid Brown?
So next is succession planning. I can't do this forever, even though I love doing what I do. But I also will tell you there are times and days when I say, why am I still doing this or doing this particular thing?
Cash buyout?
Nah. So I'm working on succession planning. That's my number one goal today. I've got, some assistance from outside. I've got assistance inside. My goal is to, in the next couple of years, to transition to a chairman's position and look to hopefully maybe one of the G4 members are ready, or if not ready, maybe one of our senior managers will bridge that gap until they are ready. But I feel very confident that that next generation's got some real talent. And if it happens, in a couple of years or maybe 5 or 7 years, whatever it is, that this will continue to be a legacy for them to continue to grow. I just wish I was 40 years younger with this balance sheet and this scale and come back as one of these kids.
Yeah,
Man, I'd
wow.
have great time.
That's legacy, though, and that is phenomenal where you've taken it from. So advice to a young entrepreneur about going into business, period, family business, and potentially the logistics and transportation business as well.
So we have 4 big operations. So when I was talking about diversity, it's diversity of service offerings, it's geographic diversity, it's customer diversity. So diversity, whatever you're doing, if you're making one product and that might be hot for a while, think about what the next product or the next service you're going to do. Because if you just stayed focused on the one thing and not thinking about something, you got to have diversity because what's hot today may not be hot tomorrow. What service is needed today is going to change. The scary part out there, what's next? I don't know what AI, I spend a lot of time now researching what AI and the impact that's going to have on so many different things out there. To me, that's one of the game changers that's going to take place. It's going to take some time, but it's for real. So I look at that and say, hey, next generation, get up to snuff, look at where the applications will be, and try to think that out. But the classic person starting today, I guess 2 or 3 things I could say. 1, take calculated risks. Not risks, but calculated risks. Know what the percentage is that something's going to happen. Like if we have a customer that wants willing to sign a 3-year lease on a warehousing deal, and the landlord, I have to sign a 5-year lease. So what's the calculated risk that they're going to renew? Is it 60%, 70%? Do your homework and figure it out and take that calculator. And I'm, the best hitters in baseball hit 1 out of 3. So, if you hit, 2 out of 3, it's pretty good, right? You're not going to make all the right decisions. So take calculated risks. 2, develop your people because you can't do it all yourself. And if you don't develop people, you're going to end up one day saying, man, where am I? And a lot of them do get to that point. Well, where am I means, oh man, I can't do this anymore. I got to sell. I'm in no position, right?
Done a lot of acquisitions because they outgrew themselves.
They outgrew themselves.
Yeah.
And then the third thing is make sure you find the balance between family and work because it can't be all work and it can't be all family. You got to find that right balance. And yes, sometimes you're going to have to make sacrifices on one side or the other, but find that balance. If you can do those 3 things, I think you'll be successful whatever you do.
Wow. Well, listen, you've had
Amazing.
this amazing friendship that has been both business and personal. And Fortunately, a lot of personal. and
Amazing.
you know, Sid, listening to you here and knowing you over the years and how smart you are, but listen, boy, you'd be a great professor. And I don't know,
You know,
guest
some
lectures.
I do. A friend of mine teaches a class, Alan Feldman, at the University of
Does he
Penn.
bring you in as a guest?
And he brings me in. I guess this happens to be the one thing I didn't mention is we do a lot in real estate. That's a big part of our business. We develop, we buy, we acquire. My brother Jeff runs that division now. So he asked me as a guest speaker, and I've always liked real estate. Why have I liked real estate? Because you're foundationally building something that's going to last beyond your lifetime, right? But I go in there and I guest lecture. I love interacting with the students. It's more me asking them questions at times than me asking them.
It's inspirational. I do a lot of teaching. It's lecturing. It's inspirational, especially in a place like
maybe
that.
someday I'll spend a little bit more time when I kind of throttle this thing back.
You got so much to give, and thanks for sharing it with us. You got to thank your friend.
My brother. Thank you for being
Hey guys, thank you for having me on here. You know, one, it's an honor and I'm humbled by it. Two, if I can impart some wisdom to somebody that takes one or two tidbits and kind of thinks about it sometime down the road, then I think I've done a good thing.
There were a lot of tidbits, a lot, and a lot more than that. So for me, thank you very much. Bill, you can send it off with a toast to Sid Brown.
Toast to my good friend, Sid and company.
Thank you.
Amen. Thanks for listening to Uncorked. We'll catch you next time.